is put up some slides, go through the questions, and you're very welcome to, as we go through it, um, be able to ask some questions or ask some points and stuff like that. So I'll either take them as they go along, or I'll do them as the end. So, Lachlan, there, have you see my screen fine?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Great,
I'll
great,
leave it
great,
with
great.
you now.
Yeah, brilliant. Good stuff. Well, thanks very much for coming along to this. As some of you know, you might get my weekly bulletin, and we thought this was an opportunity. You know, many of you have come on our courses, and this is our opportunity to give something back to you and to say thank you for coming on our training and to answer your questions, everything BIA. So don't be afraid to ask some questions. Doesn't matter how complex or uncomplex. Hopefully, we can answer them today. Right. Just very quickly, just so you know who I am, because I think it's always good to know who we're dealing with. So, as Lachlan said, a fellow of the BCI is quite a closely guarded honour to become a member of the fellow of the BCI. I think there's only about 128 or 130 of us worldwide. As a company, I'm Plan B Consulting, so that's the bottom thing. And Lachlan, who's my brother, and I founded BCT. I don't know, Lachlan, was it about 7, 8 years ago?
I think we're on eight years, maybe 9 years.
All right. A little
10
bit
years
longer
next year.
for the company party, yes. So basically, I go between BCT and Plan B Consulting. So I'm a full-time consultant. And actually, this week I've been working for BCT doing the GPG course. My own background, I worked for Angling Water, worked for Scottish Power, and then previous to that, I was in the army. So that's a little bit about who I am. So you kind of you can get your sort of stereotypes of my own background in there. But let's go to our first question. This is for Christopher Lewis, and we actually work together at Angling Water Services there. So actually, what goes around comes around. So a big shout out, as the DJs would say, to Christopher Lewis for his questions there. So the question here, you can read it, is all about business impact analysis and risk assessment, done together or separately. What's done first, does it matter the benefits, and also we'll just do a little delve into the ISO as well, of which ones we do. Now, the first thing I want to point out to you, Christopher, and I've just been doing this week, if you want to be a purist, then actually, business continuity, in the end, you can do whatever you want. You actually shouldn't be doing a risk assessment. You should be doing a threat analysis. That is what, if you read the GPG, does. And I've got a slide on here to have a little look at what is the difference between threat risk analysis or risk assessment and threat analysis. So I'm going to come on to that, and I'm going to come on to some of the benefits there. So a good and interesting question here. So basically, as you see, this is a BCI slide, is your threat assessment and your threat analysis and your BIA is all done as part of the BC life cycle in your analysis stage. So if you remember the BC life cycle, you've got your embedding business continuity in the middle of the circle. Round the outside, you've got policy and program management, and right at the top, you've got your analysis bit. And I'm sure you're all aware, this is one of the key bits of the business continuity life cycle. So as it says here, we need to know what its objective is, how it functions, the constraints of the environment which it operates. And basically, to me, the BIA and the work we're going to do here is probably the most critical thing you're going to do in the whole of business continuity. a bit of debate in business continuity, sort of technical world about whether BIA is dead and whether it's required and whether it's you can go straight on to plan. But for me, the BIA is the most critical thing that we're going to do. Because if we don't know what we're trying to achieve, how can we write a plan to achieve it? So if we don't know the destination, how can we navigate to where we're going? And to me, I'll go on to the contents of the BIA, but unless you do this properly, and you might not get it 100% right first time, maybe 80, 90% right, then everything else is going to be wrong after what you do. So let's just have a quick flick through of what we're going to do actually in the BIA bit. So, and these are all the sort of things you can do to greater or less extent. So, in the GPG at the moment, we've got these four different types of BIAs. Initial, strategic, tactical, and operational. Now, to me, these different types of BIAs are a little bit kind of it's a little bit trying to the GPG is a little obsessed with tactical, operational, and strategic, and it's basically trying to sort of shoehorn the BIA into this. So the idea is you do initial BIA when you very start your BC program, and it might tell you which bits of the business or your organization to put in scope and out of scope. So you might put out of scope things that bits of the business coming to the end of its life, don't make a lot of money, things you might be selling off. So we kind of concentrate our BIA on the most interesting bits. And this does work. The strategic BIA is doing at the products and services level, and that's a little bit of speaking to top management and actually saying, right, you've got three different products. Which one do you care the most about? Which one makes the most money? Do you have a gut feel of how long we cannot provide a product or service and we survive? So we do strategic level BIA. We're doing the tactical level BIA, so this is more at the activity level, and this is what most of us do, and I do this, a sort of slightly bottom-up BIA when we're looking at all the different activities across the organization, and we are building what are our activities and mainly what are our RTOs for our activities. So I don't know if you can see that bit there. What are my RTOs and activities? And then we got our operational BIA, which is a bit beloved of people who love BIAs, is all your resources. And just if you're doing a BIA, a little tip from the top here, every single bit of information you have in your BIA should tell you something and inform a decision which you're going to move later. So do not, as people do, is just collect information for the sake of collecting information. So do not have a 37-page workbook spreadsheet which has immense amounts of information, but actually you can't actually do anything useful with that information. And we just count things because of the fact we can count things. So very much there is an operational BIA. Look at your resources and just do a bit of a triage and chuck out anything you don't particularly need in your BIA. So in our BIA, we're going to prioritize our business activities. So we're going to use our MTPD. That's the time, our sort of drop dead time, and then we're going to have our RTOs, which are between the MTPD and the incident, and they could be in the middle third of the time between our MTPD and RTOs. And for me, as I said earlier, your activities and your RTOs are the most critical things that you do. Because once you've got your RTOs agreed, and signed off by top management, then that is your planning. That is what you're trying to achieve with your plans and your strategies. So RTOs then goes on to your strategies. Why I've got draft and set there is you might have your draft RTO and you might adjust it as per your strategy. So if you've got an activity you want recovered in 24 hours and an IT system is critical to that activity, and you can only recover for free, you can recover it with an existing capability within 48 hours, you've either got to change the IT recovery or you've got to push out the draft RTO. And sometimes, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, you push out the draft RTO to 48 hours to meet what you can do with the IT system. We've got list of products and services. Don't forget your time and seasonal time changes. MBCO is very much about what level at your RTO do you want to recover the activity. And then we go on to impacts over time, and you can include your financial impacts over time. We do our interdependencies. We need our back to normal time, and then we conduct BIAs. We go kind of round in circles as an organization. So we started off doing workshops and we're just disparaging about interviews. We're now at the interview stage and we like interviews. I'm not sure whether we're going to go back to workshops. They all give different things, and they all give different things to different organizations. So that is a very quick canter around the BIA, which is actually not answering Krista's problem at all. So that's why I want to go on to the threat analysis. Now, this is again a slide from the BCI, and the thing about threat analysis there is sort of the same as risk assessment, but I suppose what we're doing is, if you've got enterprise risk management in place, your risk management is looking purely holistically across the organization and may or may not do, depending on how you do it, get down to some very granular risks down at the very operational level. So sometimes it's done at a higher level, or some of the granular lists at the operational level may not have been picked up by the operational people. Maybe they live with this risk for years, and so they don't really think it's important. So first of all, the threat analysis is going down at a sort of quite granular level. And it's basically, there's a bit here all about saying that if you use a risk matrix for looking at risks at a BIA level, then actually, if you use a kind of 3x3 matrix, the top right, which is the very, very high, maybe 30 or 40 times more than the next circle round, so the 2x2 risks. But if it's a scale, the 6x, I'm going to explain this, the 3x3 is 9 and the 2x2 is 4, but it could be 30 times worse. So what we're saying here a little bit is threat analysis is not the same as risk management, but it is sort of. It's just that in the business we're focusing on a little bit more. And the other thing is, what we're going to focus in a little bit more is on the most urgent activities, so we want to do that there. So let's go on and look at my threat analysis. To me, when I'm doing this, the key bit I'm looking at is my single points of failure. So what I'm looking at is anything that can take maybe the organization or at least some of my key activities down, who could actually, that single point of failure fails, and actually we look at, and so that could take the whole organization bit. And when we're doing it, our kind of impact is it a low, a minor inconvenience? So yeah, we can have a single point of failure, but actually we're not too bothered if that resource goes down. or is it medium disruptive to the organization, not fatal in the short term? So eventually this key resource will take the organization down or stop it delivering its products and services, but it won't do straight away. And then the high ones are lose that resource, IT system, maybe a building, then straight away that activity is completely dead. So again, I'm doing single points of failure and I'm really focusing in those high impacts. Now, I can't spell likelihoods, but please excuse me on that one. Um, well, I can't spell anything at all here, actually, as obviously I didn't put my spell checking there before I put my slides through there. A couple of answers. I'll get to your questions in a wee second once I finish this slide. In terms of, that's meant to say likelihood. In terms of likelihood, I don't, me personally, and you can do it yourself, depends upon what you like to do. But I personally don't spend a lot of time on likelihood. So for me, if I got a single point of failure and it could happen, it can happen. Whether it happens once in 1,000 years or once every year, does it matter? You know, if you have a data center and you only have one data center and it fails, well, it fails in 10 years' time, fails tomorrow, the impact's still the same. So I don't spend a lot of time on spending on this, having a look at the on the likelihood. You can look at likelihood, and I suppose if we start to get into threat analysis and the risk mitigation, you can then, if you're going to spend money on things, you've got a limited amount of money, you might say, actually, in our calculation or gut feel, this is more likely to happen than that one. So we're more likely to have power cuts, so it might be worth spending a standby generator than you know, our whole building blowing up or something. So we may take that in likelihood in there, but as at the beginning, we don't, for me personally, I don't spend a lot of time on likelihood because also, unless you employ an actuary, it's also a finger in the air. So is it 1 in 2 years or 1 in 5 years, 1 in 10 years? Well, do we know? And also, again, there, I've put, when I'm doing my threat analysis, and I'll just take you through a wee script in a second, we want to look at, that says premises, people, resources, and suppliers. So those of you who've done the GPG course, then we're looking at your PPRS. So what can we lose and where? The building or premises? Have we got a key single point of failure? People. Resources is IT, telephony, and anything else you use. And supplies is supplies, so actual supplies you have and suppliers. So that is what the threat analysis is going to go out. Notice also in our threat analysis, I don't really care. I might take an opinion, I might even write down what the likely threats are to cause this. So you might say, actually, you know, we've got a flood there, particularly partial to a flood if you're in a floodplain, or you're particularly partial to fire, or I've just been doing some work in the Philippines, so you know, tsunamis and not tsunamis, yes, but typhoons and earthquakes. So you're going to have some definite threats, but I don't think you want to spend a lot of time, or I don't, looking at every single threat that can happen. It's more about, for me, it's about the consequence on our key resources there, our key assets there, and our PPRS. So I've got a couple of questions for Mark there. This is coming back. So if you perform procedure today, do times enterprise the product has an MTP, then set them in time for the technical operation, or can they longer? Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that kind of, and it is a little bit of debate, and you had to sort of think about it. If your senior managers say, right, for this product and service, we're happy to go with 3 days, then actually, could you have an RTO of an activity which underpins that at less than? I hope that's the question you're asking. Can you have an activity with a shorter RTO? And I think you can say yes because some of your RTOs may be about enabling activities. So you might want to, as part to hit your 3 days, your RTO of your IT getting themselves up and going could be, 2 hours, 3 hours, 24 hours. I also think you might have some activities round about customer service, customer relationships, call centers, which are not intimately involved in the recovery of the actual products and services, but would support and manage the reputational issue. So you might want to have your call center up and going for maybe this is a call center for customer queries, or it is, some sort of support, which you might have up in one day, which is good customer service, and then you actually get that product and service back up and going in 3 days. So I think you can. Let's have a look at the second question there. Got most of the way up. When area finds struggles with the MTPD, do you have any
Charlie,
tips?
would it be possible to read out the whole question because the attendees can't actually read the question?
All
They can
right.
actually see the question. Thanks.
Oh, they don't see the question, right. One area I find everyone struggles with is the MTPD. Do you have any tips on how we can present this to the teams we are working with so we can better understand how to assign a time frame to it? Let me come at it. I'm going to go through the other stuff and I'm going to come back to it because I've got a wee slide and I think I know where to find it. So you might need to talk amongst yourselves for a quick second. I'll find that. I'll come to that. I'll come to that one at the end. Right. Just give you a couple of examples of threat analysis and some of the things we come across in different clients we've done things. The biggest one I've seen with 2 or 3 organizations, and maybe for example I'll use is a high-tech company we work with in Sweden. This company works in Sweden. It's uber techy. It's doing deep packet inspection. So it's something very, very, it looks at stuff that goes through pipes, through internet pipes. So, it's pretty high tech, high complicated bit here. And not a huge company, but they have offices around the world and clients around the world, and they got support and all the rest of it. Now, when we first started with them, they had one data center in a factory that used to be a bicycle factory, so it was wooden and it was quite sort of full of oil, so quite flammable. And they didn't even have a UPS on their data center. And this data set did their email, it did their website, and it did all their IT worldwide. So even offices they had around the world had very limited local functionality, if anything at all. Now we went into there and said to them, well, where's your backup data center? They said, oh, we don't have one. Because their power's pretty good, never had a problem, so why would they do it? So, if your website goes down, your telephones goes down because it's voice over IP, you can't get any your email bounce back, and you can't get hold of the company, to me says that company's gone out of business. So what we did is work with them over time, and now they've got an alternative data center, they've got a UPS, they practice that. Now, to me, that was blindingly obvious because actually, it doesn't, I'm not a techie, but it seems blindingly obvious if you've got a single point of failure database that wasn't very good. But they just not think about it. And I think to me, if we're doing BC, we've got to add some value. And I came away from that assignment saying, look, we have added value. That company may have collapsed if they lost the data center, totally. Because at the time they got themselves up and going, their customers might have lost all their customers, and maybe not, but it would have really serious impact on their reputation, especially being a techie company. And I really felt we added some value to that company and protecting them. And I've seen a number of other companies Smaller companies where they just have one data center, and if you ask them to say, well, we've got backup tapes, well, yeah, that's fine, but what are you going to do with your backup tapes? You need to go out and buy a server. You need to go and find a rack somewhere to put it in there. You need communications. You need to run the tape up. Have you ever recovered your tape? Have you got the right level of software? Have you ever practiced getting all your different systems back in sync again? So to me, that is the value we add at business continuity. And sometimes the risks are maybe even blindingly obvious, but they may not be blindingly obvious to the company because they perhaps never thought in the way that us business continuity people do. Buildings. If you go into manufacturing, then there's some interesting risk analysis bit about actually understanding the organization. Say, can you lift and shift your manufacturing, or actually is all you can do is produce resilience? Because if you're producing defense manufacturing, you're only licensed to produce that piece of equipment in that factory. You can't go elsewhere. Or if you're manufacturing something quite specialist, you can't really do it elsewhere. So it's understanding that and understanding threats. And sometimes you're just saying, well, actually, in terms of threat analysis, there is no alternative to this factory. So basically, if a jumbo jet landed and wiped out, we're out of business. Or you actually say, right, we've got contingency plans where we'll actually, after 3 or 4 months, we'll buy from the opposition, or we'll retool somewhere else. So it's understanding those bits. And the bit about labs is we're doing some work with a building manufacturer, a building materials manufacturer, and their quality is checked every 4 hours by their labs, and they x-ray the product. If they can't x-ray the product, they can't guarantee the quality, so they can't produce. And so, and they have 3 x-ray machines, but they're all in the same building. So basically, use your x-ray machine, they would have to stop production every day, because they manufacture 24/7. Every day lost production costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, it's finding those single points of failures that people have not thought about. We find people with knowledge, so that's good stuff. Single points of failure people. I've gone into an organization the other day which had, well, we back up. Well, where's your backup? Well, it's sitting on top of the backup machine. And they had the situation where if they lost their data center, they would lose. So some of their data center was backed up, but their individual drives were backed up on they were only backed up in this data center, and the backups were on top of the main system. So if they lost their backups and the main system, they would have lost all the data. Now, to lose a lot of data puts you really in serious trouble if you lose your data. And some of the other things there, I've seen the questions from Lee there, so I'll come on to that in a wee second. If you get some things like down to some fire practice. I think in the UK we're pretty good at doing fire practices, or mainly good at doing the fire practice. But a lot of other places we go to, people don't do fire practices and fire rehearsals. So we're persuading people to do those. And again, that's kind of adding value. It's looking after people, protecting the staff. So the media training spokespeople, making sure that people have done their media training. Have they actually got trained spokespeople? So again, it's actually looking at their threat, their recovery, and saying, look, if your CEO is the most likely person to go out there, has he or she had training? Do they know what they're going to be doing? And often I see is this paper document. Now, more and more of the stuff we all do is, if we have paper on our desk, it's hard copy of soft documents. But if you go into quite a lot of organizations, you'll find all their HR files are often originals. Some organizations, especially towards the Middle East, keep copies of people's certificates. So, can they lose all their certificates? So we need to have a look at our paper records and see whether our paper records, if we lose them, do we have a major impact? So there's a few examples there of the benefit of threat analysis. What I want to do is really answer the questions. I think, Andy, your question is about RTO, so I'm going to come back to that at the end. What I wanted to do, if my technology is working here, is to just take you through briefly our BIA questionnaire. This is one I did, and this was interesting a little bit because this was designed to be used by non-BC professionals. So we were working on my building manufacturing, and this was a questionnaire. So we had a whole load of people, non-BC professionals, who were doing the interview. So this was a kind of interview form. So, Lachlan, can you see my screen all right? Can we see me on BA interview scripts?
Yes, I can see the screen. Thank you.
Right, good. So this will give you that. And the answer to the question of your question, Christopher, very long-windedly, is yes, that you should do both at the same time. Because if you've got that person, you want to hit them once, not physically, but in terms of interview, you want to do it once. You don't want to go back. Because often when you're talking about resources, you're saying, right, here's the resource, here's an X-ray machine, how many of those do, what's the limited amount of X-ray machines you can use? And one of your other questions is then going to be about how many, what happens if you lose them, what's the impact? And if the impact's high, you're collecting that for your BIA, but you're also thinking, right, we've got a single point of failure here because they're all in the same building, even though we've got 3 of them. So you're looking at the 2 at the same time. So this is a questionnaire, some information there all about just making sure that it's not an audit. They're the experts to try and butter up the people and say, and you're saying here, we're not coming to audit. Talk a little about business impact analysis. And then here, this bit, mandatory period disruption. This is all about your RTOs and your activities and things. So we get them to talk through that. And what we have here is a little bit about setting the RTOs. So we're making sure that if you, depending on your MTPD, we've got some set times for your RTO. And then we're doing some statutory legal requirements and some dependencies and some stakeholders, because that's going to feed into the plan later on. So this is coming towards, and actually not being a purist, I call it a threat assessment, where it should be threat analysis. So is your department dependent on any HQ building and staff can easily join from home or other locations? So I'm there focusing in on buildings. Have you got a single point of failure for that department in the building? And I'm getting a feel for, can they work from home? Yeah, we work from home. We're very an agile workforce, no problem. Or is this bit a problem? So depend upon a supplier. So I'm looking at to try and get a list of our key suppliers, which is good. But I'm also looking again is we've got any single points of failure in suppliers, and maybe we need to do some more work. Present level of IT recovery acceptable needs of your department. One way of doing this is one way of doing it. You're hoping here, or you're checking that they actually know what the IT level of IT recovery is. And there might be a problem there because actually people may not doing. But again, I'm focusing in on the IT, and I'm looking at the risk and say, is the IT down? What happens there? Present level of telephone recovery, acceptable recovery needs of your department. So I'm focusing on telephony there. Any single points of failure among your existing staff. So we're covering our staff, so we're covering off all our PPRS. And you can see paper records. And then we've got the catch-all 7, any other resources. And then we've got some back end bits about incident and risks. So any risks, stop your business delivering activities. So are there anything actually in particular? So we've moved away from the resources end to say, is there anything that actually else could do that could do that? And then have we had any incidents? So that might inform us of what the sort of, yeah, we have a park out every week. We had a park out for a week 2 years ago. So that's maybe informing us. And then have they got any plans in place? So you see there, I think the answer to the question that for you, Christopher, is that if you're getting a one hit with person, you're doing an interview or doing a doing a workshop, you try and cover off everything, and you're exploring, you're questioning, you're teasing, you're looking at it, you're looking at the past, and you're trying to get that picture of these activities now quickly, plus these are the risks that can stop them happening. And just if I go back to my slides, so we've done an example BIA script. If you can see that there, then the ISO, this is just our form for using the ISO as we're going through it. Yes, you've got 2.2.2, which is last bit of your question, talking, that's all the BIA bit. And we come on to risk assessment. Sorry. Coming on to risk assessment, but basically they can be done in parallel together. So do your risk assessment. Notice that ISO call it risk assessment. GPG is a threat assessment. So there's two ways to do. So you should, well, I think you should do them together. Coming on to our next question from Tammy, who's obviously maybe very keen on getting up at an ungodly hour of the day to come and do this. Simplest way to document, what is the simplest way to document a BIA? Doesn't involve the purchase of dedicated continuity software. Can you show us an example? We recently taken on a software from the UK, not the UK, from the USA called Catalyst. So we are basically saying there is absolutely no way you can do now. You can't do a BIA without using software, and particularly this software, of course. Now, software and BIAs. You don't need to have software, the first thing is, and people have been doing this, I'm not going to say for hundreds of years, for years without using software. I'll fire up a quick BIA for you to have a look at. The great thing about software is it's about a database and about relationships. So software is good at doing relationships and also making sure that if you have something in your BIA once, so you can do clever things like if you have a system and all the departments say how quickly they want that system back, and you can actually tell the system how quickly the IT people can get the system back at the moment, then it can do a kind of little gap analysis and say for all the activities that use that system and it's back in 24 hours, none of them have an RTO of less than 24 hours, so that is sufficient. Now you can work that out fine on a spreadsheet. A software makes it easier, but you don't need it. The first of all is other ways as we come onto the software. I'm a bit of the opinion also that actually you don't need. We don't do it in spreadsheets. And the reason we don't do it in spreadsheets is I think spreadsheets are good. The difficulty with spreadsheets is they don't, I like to have a single document you can look, and it's difficult to QA spreadsheets. It's quite easy to change things in spreadsheets and to change things without realizing that, or someone changes it and there's no QA to tell you that it's changed. So we tend to have a more kind of BIA document, so that actually if anyone asks, there's a BIA document, we have one central BIA document for the whole organization. So let's have a quick flick through to answer your question, Tammy, the BIA document. Right, let's come on to there. This is for imaginary company called Via C, which we have done for training purposes. So notice is a Word document, first of all, here, and it's got lots of QA and it's got lots of amendments there. Um, in terms of it, because it's a Word document, you can do a bit of background and purpose and provide a bit of a structure. So if you're giving anyone to have a look at your BIA, you're providing a little bit of a kind of background in how you did it. And then we got prioritize activities in BIA, minimum business continuity ejected, threat assessment. Again, I'm not doing it very well there. Go assessment and interdependencies. So here we got a bit of background, scope and description, a little bit about the organization there. Products and services. Now again, some of this is good background information. And if you're going for the ISO, you needed to put this information in there. So I put it in there. And you can see this is the background to my prioritized activities in BIA. So I've got, these are my key priorities. So loss of customer service, financial loss, lost term recovery, and loss of sales. And we got some time scales, which I'm keeping an eye on the time to see if we can get round to doing that MTPD stuff. And this is the procedure, how we went to do it. Those are who was consulted. And then this is now getting onto the BIA information here. So you can see, I think we did it first on a spreadsheet and then cut and pasted it across there. But no software, just a straight information. And also, what I quite like is about here is you can put some reasons for MTP, which software doesn't really like lots of text, but actually in the BIA, because these things shouldn't change an awful lot. Numbers will change, but you know, the criticality of an activity shouldn't change. You really want to put why you put it as this. So I quite like quite a lot of text in my BIA, because otherwise you put a whole load of numbers, and the numbers are quite strange. You never remember whether it's, did I make a typo and put the wrong number in there, or why was the reason we put a very tight RTO on that. I'm sure there was a good reason, but I can't remember why. So that's prioritize activities. So there's pages of that. And then we've got there some potential financial impacts. Again, it's text. And then we've got some minimum business continuity objectives. And there's our IT systems matrix. So those are what systems we use, when we use them, the manual workaround, what's our RTO and RPO for the systems. And what else have we got here? So we've got some staffing numbers. So this is initial staffing numbers. So minimum staffing numbers are RTO, what numbers we need. So you've got some initial staffing numbers. We got some workstation numbers build up over time for different buildings. We got some resources, what resources and when do we need them. And then what else we got? Then we got our threat analysis, threat assessment. So we got some threats, we got some vulnerabilities, background information, and then we have some resource requirements. So you can see some threats. So I said we have put some threats in there. What's our vulnerabilities there? And I really focus in on the highs. And then what's the threat mitigation treatment? So it's perfectly acceptable to have BCP as your threat mitigation and treatment. And so there's a lot more there. And then we got some other threats, some worst case scenario, maximum scale of incident, all good stuff. Some interdependencies there. So there's a BIA in a couple of minutes. But what it's saying is, you know, you don't need any fancy software to do that. And you don't need, to me, there's not a terrible amount of analysis behind the bit. You know, if there was an algorithm for BIA, then someone would have done it already. Or someone would produce some software with it. There isn't. A lot of BIA is all about gut feel, is all about experience, is all about those sort of things. So software, yes, it's quite good at holding information. It can quite give you some good relationships, but it doesn't do anything that you can't do with a spreadsheet. It's just better at controlling it, and some of the relationships are built in already. that has an advantage and disadvantage in that, you know, somebody who's written the software has thought about what BC people want. On the other way, it's 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 if you want your cut your data in a different way, then and it's not the same way the software's been written, then you can't have it in that way. So there are double edges with the software. So I'm going to take some questions here. Let's do the one. Hi, so this is from Lee. Hi, is an RTO meant for is it only meant for system recovery? What recovery of non-IT activities? Should we have SUSETs of IT and operational RT, an operation of IT and operational RTOs? Lee, absolutely right. We have RTOs for systems. We could basically have RTOs for any asset we want. So we could have them for pieces of equipment, telephone systems, but most often they're for systems. And then you have your set of activities and you have RTOs for all your activities. So yes, so you have operational RTOs. So you're absolutely right there. Right, David Hutchins, can you provide a copy of the example you shown? Give us an email and we'll talk about that offline. So we can do that. If you email BCT, we can have a look at that. What level of BCT is this one? Initial tactical or etc.? I would say it is a tactical and operational. So tactical is an activity one, and an operational one is a resources one. So it's if you're a purist again, it's going to be a tactical and an initial. Any other questions, stick them on. I'm just going to see if I can find this slide very quickly for that question. Let's have a look at this. Right. This is MTPD in a very quickly. This is the way I like to show people here. We've got time along the bottom and we've got impact low to high. For every activity you have, there is a time at which if you don't do it, becomes unacceptable. If you don't produce anything, then sooner or later you get nothing to sell, so your company goes, organization goes. If you're a public sector and if you don't do any social services or you don't do any healthcare, eventually, maybe very quickly, that is unacceptable. So if you're in a hospital and you don't do any high intensity nursing, then that very quickly becomes, you know, within a minute or so, people die. So there are different levels of unacceptability. So there is a level of which activities they don't do. We know that some things do quicker. So if everything's something operational, provides service to your customers, it can have an unacceptable impact very quickly. So that's A. B is something that has a bit longer, and C could be HR, which actually, if we don't do any HR, eventually we'll have no staff. Eventually they'll all get annoyed. Eventually all our staff will disappear. They're off and we haven't recruited anyone. So we have some different levels there. So what we do is we say, it's difficult to know exactly when that becomes unacceptable, because on a slow news days we can lose our reputation very quickly. On a very, if 9/11 happens at the same time, no one might notice our incident and something else has happened. So the time at which our unacceptable crosses the line is a ballpark. So what we do is we say it's difficult to know the exact time. So what we say is we bracket the time. So we know HR is 1 month plus, and we know A is roughly from 1 to 2 days. It's not unacceptable in 0 to 24 hours. We can take a bit of pain, but the really bad pain is in 24 to 3 hours. And you can see that B crosses the line in the 1 week to 1 month. So what that's giving us is our MTPD and we look at the MTPD across a number of different bracketed times. Once we've got MTPD, we can then start working backwards to give us our RTOs. So that's NTP very quickly. Our RTO is only used for IT backup activities. David, yes, pretty much sure. I was trying to think if there's anything around about paper and stuff, but I think it's mainly it's basically data backup. So I think yeah. Lewis, your question is, what about products and their important priority in being bought back and RTOs for each one? Does this need to be included in the BIA? Yes, I do think that's your strategic BIA. There is a question is, and I do this, a lot of BIAs do the bottom up. And then they will go to the top managers, hopefully, and not everyone does that, get the RTOs signed off. If you're according to the book and I think this is the right answer, is what you should do is you should look at you should ask top manager first because they may have a firm idea of how quickly, and sometimes the pain they're prepared to take is maybe more than actually the local people is. So I think it's worth getting their view from the top there. On your question here, is it worth asking if they're aware of any high risk immediate names, a chemical plant next door, animal testing office, which means you get press and access to your site? Absolutely right. One of the good ways if you're doing a threat analysis and you're being very keen is walk around the building and then walk around the perimeter and actually go and have a look at what are they actually doing next door in that warehouse. And you actually find the welding stuff, so that's fire. And actually if you get a fire next to exhausting cylinders, then you have to leave them for 24 hours. You should know if there's an animal testing organization next door, but one of your points is to have a look at your neighbors and maybe have a look at your more general map and understand, is there a coma site next door, a highly explosive site next door? So yeah, you need to have a look at that. I think that's the question, Lachlan. How are we doing for times, or do we want to? As it's quite tight on time, do we want to wrap it up there? I've got no more questions, and I could go on to this forever about BIAs, but how are we doing for time there?
No, I think that's been brilliant. We've got 5 minutes to go, so I think we should let people to go on their merry way. I would just like to say thank you very much to you, Charlie. It's been a very informative insight into BIA, and I feel that we've covered pretty much all the questions asked by the attendees. Thank you to all those that attended, listened in, and asked questions. We'll be sending out a copy of the webinar as today's bulletin in case you missed out some of the webinar. If you have any feedback on this webinar, please just reply to any of the emails that you've received from us and we'll take any action if necessary. The next webinar will be on Friday, 26th of May at 11 AM. We will announce the expert and the subject very soon.
But maybe if they have any thoughts or questions or anything particularly you would like to, or a theme you would like to do, then that would be useful, because maybe, you know, we want to go something a bit more resilience or something a bit more wider there.
Yeah, like I say, if you've got any thoughts or anything, just to email into any of the emails you receive from us, and we'll take action and we'll respond or take that on board. In the meantime, from me, thank you very much for joining us. And if you're in the UK, we hope you enjoy the bank holiday weekend. So I'll sign off and say goodbye, and maybe Charlie, just say goodbye as well.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. Thanks for listening. I hope you find that useful. And yeah, as Tammy says, you don't need business continuity software for. I'm doing it, but we'd love to sell you some if we could do. No. You don't need software for doing it, and risk assessment done at the same time as your BIA. So there's the two questions answered within a second. Thanks so much. Have a good weekend. Cheers, Em.